So our park is located in the northeast of Xi'an and also at the upper wind direction of the city. And as the wetland, this humid air will be blown into the city, which also can serve as a thermometer to the city area. And in this park, the water area takes up about 2,000 moors, and we have been dividing the park into 4 sections. And we are now at the intricate area with 400 moors of area land. And this is mainly the wetland with a bit of human intervention and is carefully designed. We can see multiple kinds of water birds here. Okay, now let's take a look at some of the water birds here. And what you are seeing now is a special kind of water birds called the Night Heron. And it is called the Night Heron for a reason. This kind of birds usually would seek to capture food at night. And when it hunts, it will usually extend its neck. And also, at the center of the lake, there is an island, and on top of the trees at the island, you can see a lot of cormorants resting. And also, this is the biggest flock in the park. We can also observe the Swan Goose in the park. And also there are gray goose. The gray goose bill is red, and it's very easy to distinguish them with the swan goose. And this kind of swan goose usually would habitat, they would appear in small flocks. And usually the male and female would come in pairs with their babies. I've also taken notice that in the South Lake, the river is actually flowing and it is diverged from the Bahe River. So can you tell us more about this functional wetland? As you can see, all of these water systems in this park are live water, which actually is a divergence from the Bahe River. And we introduced the Bahe River's water into the park. And at the entrance of the park, you will rest for a while for the sediment to drop, and also there is another processing lake for the filtering of sands and smaller gravels. And this part of wetland is a very special kind of wetland. We've taken notice that on our right-hand side there is a group of goose and swan goose. And this goose is actually very special guest to us because it actually have been mated with the swans, and this goose would just travel with the swan goose as if they were the same species. So this is a very special phenomenon in our park. So is the swan goose the kind of bird that is sung by many singers, like Mongolian singers? And we have also been learning this from the textbook, saying that when they migrate, they would shift to a lot of different matrix. Sometimes they will form a line, and some would form two lines. And there will be a leading swan goose in this flock, like a leading runner in a race, so that when this bird is leading, the others can save a bit of energy. So this is a very good example of teamwork among animals. That is a great agate standing over there. There are all kinds of agates. We have great agates and mini agates, but how do you tell them apart? From its appearances, we can first distinguish from its size. The smaller agates, three smaller agates is basically the same size with a great agate, and you can also tell them apart from the bills. The great agates' bills are yellow, and the small ones are in a color of red. And you can also tell them from their feet. And we have the pictures here, as you can see. You can see the different colors of bills and the skin of their feet. You can also tell them apart from their feathers. The small agates have feathers on the head. However, this kind of feathers does not exist in agates. But also, the great agates would show some differences during mating seasons. That's why some tourists would say that they look different in different seasons. So, to my understanding, the great agates would prefer to stay in shallow water. Is that correct? Yes, because they feed on water in shallow waters. And as you can see, it stands in a very elegant manner. And we have a lot of authors, a lot of writers and poets who write about this kind of birds, saying that it is a prose on its own. Okay, now let's move along. We can see that in this area, it's a constant. It's a habitat for the swan goose. We have different kinds of vegetations in this wetland, and their root system can serve as a purifier to the water system. And as we mentioned, these are live water, so when the water comes into the park, they will be purified by the vegetation and then be admitted to the outside. So this serves as a very good function to the city. We can see flocks of birds here, and these are gray goose. And when they are doing this, they are trying to hunt for fish, worms, and also water grass, this kind of water vegetations, because they will feed on multiple kinds of food. When I came here earlier, I saw a lot of swan goose. And these are quite friendly birds. If you show up at the water side, probably they will swim over here to ask for food. You can also tell its gender from the forehead of this kind of birds. So those without this kind of bud at the forehead would be female. So behind us, there are several peacocks that is following us. Also very friendly. They're not afraid of humans. Is there any way to track them over here? As is known to all, peacocks are quite a cocky and a bit narcissist, and they may be friendly, but make sure that that they are still wild animals. So keep your distance when you are trying to observe. I even also observed that some of the peacocks are trying to, approach their own shadows over the lake. These are mature and very grown up peacocks. Are these male or female? Well, those with more colorful feathers would be male, and those with those looks more plain would be female. I think it's the case for most of the animals in the nature. They are trying to cross the road, apparently. But make sure that you are not tricked by their beautiful appearances. These are also, very voracious animals, wild animals, and their bills are their biggest weapon. So this is their home. We need to keep this in mind, and we're just visiting. See, very friendly.
好，那我们先上车去下一个点。
Okay, now let's get on board and drive on to the next spot. Well, the peacocks look disappointed because we didn't give them any food. It's the same case with the most of the animals in the park. They're just frivolous like that. It's a shame, it's a pity that we do not have anything on hand to attract them over here. Actually, we do not advise our tourists from feeding these animals. In principle, but we have to just feed them, especially in the winter, in the controlled and planned manner. But we try to keep the natural habitat at as much as we can. At the meantime, we need to sustain the enough livelihood for the birds. Xi'an has a really freezing winter normally. So when the water surface is frozen, will that affect the feeding of the birds? Well, their feathers are thick enough to sustain the coldness. So they will just get around freely, even in the winters. And also in this park, because the water surface is very big, so it's not common for the whole water area to be frozen up. We can see all kinds of vegetations in this park. And I have to remind you that we have oleander in it, which is known to all is poisonous. However, oleander is the perfect purifier for carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide, as well as dust in the air. So we plant a lot of oleander trees inside this park. And we can see cormorants all around this park. We are only 20 minutes past 4. We can see that a lot of cormorants are flying back from outside the park, and they actually consider this their home and perfect habitat for them. If we come closer, we can see a lot of blackbirds, and those are cormorants. An interesting phenomenon. The birds here, the trees here are in different colors than the other trees. A bit like this phenomenon after snow, but it's not snowy today apparently. Actually, at the island, we can see this cormorants. The white cover are actually the feces of the birds because they feed on fish and shrimp in the water. So this is a very protein-rich diet for the birds. And for those so the feces of the birds are quite rich in terms of uric acid. So when they when I exile them outside, it will show the color of white.
这个地方很远啊，在这个湖心岛附近的区域。其实我们可以稍后呀，通过这个航拍来看一下。
And we can also see this from the area shot. You can see that the trees on the island is like covered with snow, which is the expression of the birds. So they would come back in the afternoon before sunset, and will they just fly out each morning like people when they punch in for work? Actually, in October each year, they would migrate to the park to spend the winter and will stay here about 6 months. In the morning, the flocks of cormorants would form lines they would just fly out of the park together, and they will go to the Qinghe River, where food is more abundant and the water space is wider than here, and they would fly back in the afternoon. So a lot of bird lovers would gather here to observe this phenomenon. And right now we can see a lot of cormorants flying back. We can, because we are a bit distant from the birds, so we can observe closely.
它那个鸬鹚呢，它主要就是全身的羽毛它是黑色的，但是它泛着一个金属的光泽。
All of the birds are covered in black feathers, but with a bit of metallic glow to it. It is very good hunter with evolution. Right now, most of the cormorants are capable of propel themselves in water with their wings. Here is a picture. You can see that its bill is curvy, and this also facilitates the birds to dive into the water. As you can see, the feathers are black. And there is a white spot on the wing. So you mentioned that there is a metallic glow to it. That's right. With evolution, right now, the cormorants can propel themselves with their wings as well as their feet. When the water is not so clear, it will also use its hearing to locate the fish. When the water is very shallow, it will also walk towards its prey. We walked a long distance, and we've discovered that the cormorants would only rest at the central area. The reason why they choose the central island is because this is a very relatively quiet place, very safe, undisturbed. And there is also water surrounding this island, which would facilitate its hunt. So a very clever kind of birds. As you can see that they would show up in flocks. And this is a mallard. very common water birds. These are actually ancestors to the ducks that we raise at home.
就现在，远处看到，感觉就是都是这个灰色的，感觉我们还没有找着这个
我们俗称它为麻麻鸭。
哦，麻麻鸭。
对对对。
They are in a color of gray.
刚才这有游客给他们网过，就是喂食。
We see that some of the tourists are feeding them, and they would just fly by. And when the visitors leave, they would just swim away.
这个鸭一般就出现在我们现在所在的这个区域吗？
So, are these habitat for the mallards?
它可以飞的。
Well, they can also fly elsewhere. These are very friendly water birds. They are actually omnivorous as the other water birds.
因为每次我们来这个地方的时候，都能看到这个就是绿头鸭。你稍微往前。
We actually see them every time I visit here.
看到就是绿头鸭在这个地方待着，就还以为它就是。
And I would think that this is their habitat. It seems like all the different kinds of different species would have a relatively stable habitat in the park.
我们刚才我还看到了一只这个绿头的，怎么又不见了？现在感觉又都剩母的了。好，那我们继续。
All right, let's move on.
其实关于绿头鸭呢，我们还有一个。
We have another research about the mallards.
在睡觉的时候，部分大脑保持清醒，部分大脑保持
The
睡眠的一个
brain of the mallard works in a very unique way. Sometimes we say that they sleep with one eye open. And according to the scientific research, the half of the mallard's brain are actually sleeping, but the other half is actually active.
可以用它当果子。
对，它其实人也是可以吃的，它是微果之王，它的维 C 含量是非常高的。你基本上吃一粒这个等于吃一颗苹果。
We have this special kind of fruit in the park, which is also food for the birds. We can see a lot of birds flying into the park at this hour. So besides Swan Goose, we also have a lot of cormorants. So besides appreciating the flying cormorants, we can also take a look at another phenomenon about the cormorants. And the cormorants are standing still. And we are now traveling and driving into another area where the vegetation is more concentrated and the vegetation coverage of this place is denser. So the air in this area is even fresher than the other part. And the temperature is colder than the other parts of the park. The humidity is higher, normally reaching about 60 to even 90%, and the oxygen concentration is also very high. Walking into this area of the park is like walking into the Qinling Mountain. Right now we're at the Jianjiahu Lake, which is the biggest lake in our park. This vast water is home to multiple kinds of water birds, such as Swan Goose, the mallards, and the cormorants. There are also some other species of birds that would fly here because this is really a very ideal habitat.
这一片湖感觉 觉是就是游览完咱们园区内，感觉是就是比较开阔的一个。
Well, this is very wide water surface, I have to
这个
say.
其实是我们就是保育区，它有6个景观，这个叫火晶映坡。我们旁边种的都是柿子树。大家知道我们西安这个柿子是非常好吃的，所以很多柿子树种在
As
这个地
you
方。
can see, we have a lot of persimmon trees over here,
灰喜鹊就会自己飞到
and
树上来
Xi'an
去
is
啄这
known
个
to
柿子
be
吃， 就不需要
a
你
very
公园
big
去管理怎么救，能看
producer
出是
in
有保
terms
护
of
这个地方的。
persimmon,
对，它是离
in
人相对来说较远
especially
一些的，
in
不像红
autumn,
雁它会
in
更
the
亲近。
harvest season of
白鹭就
persimmons.
是我会远离你，然后我高傲的站在
You
这个
would
地
see
方，
this
就
very
是我也不跟你
spectacular
们玩，我也
phenomenon
不跟你们
where the
嬉戏站在
persimmon
一起，就是我只
trees
要
in
高
the
傲的站在这个
color
地方就
of
可以了。 如
orange
果我能觅食到，
would have
我
their
就行；如果觅食
shadows,
不到，我就在这个地方等
where
着。
shadows
对，我们可以看这
on
个
the
右
surface
手
of the
边
water.
这个河岸旁边是有一个这个
On the
白
right
鹭
hand
站在那
side,
边啊。
we can
刚才
see
看
an
到白鹭其实离
egret.
我们也很远，对，在那个浅湿地那个地方离我们也很远的距离。
Also very
哎，我们
distant
看到
from
那个
us.
前面这个木桩上有站，那是鸟吗？
对，那也是白鹭，
Is that another
对，那也是
egret
白鹭。
over there?
只是看这个大小，应该是一个大的和一个小的。
That's
感
actually
觉
one
是
great
右边的
egret
小
and
也是
one
会
small
大一点。
egret.
对，可以看到就是我们鸟对岸那个地方，对，观鸟塔其实也是一个观鸟的地方，可以看到它其实形状有点像鸟巢。
We
是不是？
have
有一点
a
点像鸟巢的
special
感觉。所以
observer
我们整个的建筑它
observer
都是会选用更
stand
贴近
over
自然
there.
的东西，争取对鸟类没有太多的影响。这个水域面比较开阔，你可以上
Reminds
上面
me
游
of
的
the
这些
bird
动物
nest,
相对来
the
说自由一
gyms,
些。
right?
就它们愿意游到哪儿就游到哪儿。
As you can see,
不会
this
说
is
你人来
very
了我就来
wide
了，
water
你人走了
where
我
the
就走
birds
了。
can
它们更自
swim
由一
very
些。
freely
对，在这里我们
without
其实
much
注意到后面有一
constraints.
个这个火车道，那这个火车道对于我们
Well,
这个
we see
整个
rails
园区
over
来说有
there,
没有什么
so
影响呢？其实过火车
would that
火车的
affect
声音
the
是不是会
habitat?
对会鸟会
So would the noise of
是这样
the
子的，
train
在
affect
建园之
the
前呢，它这个火
the
车这个
habitat
道
of the
铁道它
birds?
是就是存在的，
Well,
而且
this
一直
kind
是
of
被使
this
用的。
rail has
在
been
建园
there
之前呢，
since the
生态它是一个
establishment
会是一个过
of
程。
the
在建
park.
园之
So
后，看到
after the
鸟类
founding
的
of
数
the
量还是
park,
不是很多，所以呢，它们也不会被影响。我们持续监测它不会被影响。
we,
随着
according
生
to
态
our
不断地被完善之
observation,
后，所以
the
鸟
number
类
of
总
birds
量跟
has
数量也
not
不断增加。
diminished
我们持续
due
它也是
to
一
the
个，其实
trail,
也
the
是一个
track.
鸟类它适应的一个过
And
程。长
I
长
think
住的
the
鸟
birds
它
are
是有
also
任何影响
adapting
的。
to the environment.
好，那我们先往回。
And to our permanent dwellers, they are already used to this, so they will not be affected.
就会看，就在它们其实很聪明，就它们能知道哪些地方你能去的。
As we
哪里去
mentioned,
不
the
到。
birds are
像我们
actually
公园
quite
这些
clever,
福建呀，绿地
and
公园，
they
他们
know
像一些小宝宝
where
他们
is
不
the
会跟着
best
人
habitat
到
for
达
them.
小的
They
一些
would
小岛
choose
上。
their own
我们一
home.
路过来，其实可以看到湿地公园的小岛其实非常
We
多。
can see a lot of
那我们整个公
islands
园有140
on the
多
park.
座
We
岛
have
屿呢。
more than 110
那但是呢，他们
islands
就会
in
选
the
择在
park.
你没有路，你去到不了的地方
They would
去
choose
孵
to
化小宝宝。其实
choose
说他们
to
亲人，但是在这种时候他们是相当
rest
警
at
警惕的。
those very distant islands in
那
the
我们
center
现在
of the
就可以
lake
朝我们的
where
保
the
育区去看一下，我们
humans
之前没有
would
见到的
have
一些深色
difficulty
的动物。
approaching.
对，其实保育区
It's
的
their
作用
way of
可以是
protecting
可以理解
themselves.
为就是把有一些这个比较珍惜的鸟类吧，或者是我们需要去人工繁育。
So this area is called the protected area where we would create a special environment for some more precious species. In this place, we will provide them with more natural environment with minimum human intervention. So unlike the other parts of the park, we try to minimize the human intervention in terms of water and vegetation. So this place is preserved as most of the completely natural landscapes. We try to just recreate the most natural environment for the birds. We're actually at the central route for birds migration in China. And a lot of birds, even if they don't stay here, they would just use it as a gas station for them to take a break and feed. And if they like it, they might choose to change their destination and just spend their winter here. We also have some very rare species which is unseen before in this park. And there is one special kind of birds with especially long legs and feet, almost like a ballet dancer. A very rare species which also choose to spend their winter in this protected zone in our park.
进山呀，就是去秦岭里面看到的这个场景是很像，对，感觉这头温度又会。
I think the temperature here, as you mentioned, is substantially lower than the other parts, because the vegetation here is much more intense and concentrated than the other areas. And the water surface is also bigger than the other areas. That's why we would feel colder. We can see some rare species inside this area, besides the common Swan Goose. We can also observe shags and Night Heron, which is National Protective Species of Second Degree. So a lot of rare species are enjoying the sunset over here.
进来之后，就是看到旁边就是很多木栈道，这个木栈道就是您刚说的，就是还原到这个。We
can also see when we enter this protection zone, there are some plank roads at the side, which is also built to minimize the human intervention.
你说那个湖面上是吗？ 远远的可以看到，就是苍鹭。
At the far side of the water, we have also observed some other species, such as shag and herons. Herons are a very patient kind of birds. They would wait for hours before the prey shows up. They know the best location. They rest here because this is a very quiet location and with beautiful sunshine and no winds.
其实，如果您不提这后面是一个这个夜鹭的话，我都感觉它像是白色的什么布呀，或者是什么之类的。
Those are night herons in the color of white, and they show up in such big flocks. I don't know if you can see this clearly. They also would move in flocks. They would choose to stay in the crowd instead of moving by themselves.
好，那我们来到这儿了之后，其实是要给大家讲一下，今天我们另一个比较。
The reason why we came here is that we want to show you a very special behavior of the cormorants. And the cormorants would stand on this wooden sticks So why do the cormorants would choose to stand on these pilings?
它在我们刚好进园的时候，我们都可以看它站在树枝上，站在地上。
So they would choose to stand on the wooden stakes?
他就觉得，哎，也挺好的，然后他就站在上面。
Because normally they like to stay in water, stand in water. But they found that there are this kind of wooden stakes in water, and they found, well, this looks good, and they would choose to stand on the stakes. Another important reason is that their feathers are not waterproof. So as a water bird, it is rare for them to have non-waterproof feathers and wings. So standing on the stake would avoid their close contact with the water, so that they do not need to dry their wings once they when they resume flying. If not, they would have to dry their feathers during flying time. So because they have to feed on fish, so their feathers would inevitably get wet. So before the next flying, they will have to dry their wings. So they would stand on the stakes just to dry their feathers. After entering into the protected zone, we can see a lot of cameras on the trees. So why do we install a lot of such cameras? Well, this is for us to keep a close eye on the condition of the birds. We can have this kind of information very quickly through collecting the data from the cameras. And they work 24/7. These are very precious materials, information, and data for us. And most of the time, we would see that the birds are relaxing and at ease. Unlike the birds that you would see in the cities, where most of the birds are on alert. So when the birds feel safe, they would have this kind of posture at ease. This shows that they feel undisturbed and a high sense of security. When the tourists are trying to take pictures, the birds will feel a bit anxious and they would probably concede. However, if the cameras are just installed and stable over there, they would not feel that they are being watched or observed. Our cameras are rolling 24/7, and according to our observation, the number of the birds are actually going up. We are also observing higher diversity in terms of animals in the park. Is it due to the special protection measures of the park? Yes, I think it has a lot to do with our protective measures. When it was first constructed, we aimed at improving the natural environment in this reserve. At the very beginning, we see very common animals, mostly swan goose and mallards. But with the constant improvement of the natural habitat in this park, the birds have also taken notice of this improvement, and more water birds would choose to fly here and spend their winter. And we've observed more and more rare and precious species and protected species, which also is a manifest to our work over here. And right now, this very complete and comprehensive wetland ecology has been formed. At the very beginning of the live stream, we were at the southern lake, and right now we are at the northern lake, which also is an important part to the water system. And we are drawing close to the end of the live stream, and we have witnessed and observed a lot of migrant birds in the park, and we've understood why do they choose the Chanba Park as their habitat for winter, and I think this has a lot to do with the protective measures and also the use of cameras that is installed in the habitat. I think that this has been a major improvement to the park. We believe that next year we can see more birds and in more varieties in a park, and we welcome all of the bird lovers and visitors to come here and enjoy this phenomenon. Thank you.